When nations play chess on the global stage, every move has a motive. But what if I told you that America's alliance with Pakistan isn't just about friendship? It's about leverage, legacy, and layered strategy. Before you form an opinion, let's walk through the story that headlines never fully tell. In the realm of international diplomacy, decisions are rarely made based on sentiment or emotional allegiance. They are calculated, strategic, and driven by a nation's long-term goals. When we speak of America's enduring relationship with Pakistan, despite its controversial domestic policies, complex security challenges, and fluctuating democratic practices, we have to understand the fundamental principle guiding such alliances: geography. More than ideals, more than shared values, what often shapes a partnership is location. Strategic geography has historically overridden sentiment, especially in regions where conflict, ideology, and power intersect. Pakistan is not just a country in South Asia, it is a geopolitical hinge point. Nestled between India, China, Iran, and Afghanistan, it holds a unique position that has made it indispensable to Washington's military and strategic calculations, especially throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. To understand this better, let's go back to the Cold War era. At the time, the United States was in a fierce ideological and political struggle with the Soviet Union. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 became a pivotal moment that pulled Washington deeper into South Asia's complex web. The U.S. needed a reliable launch pad to channel weapons, money, and intelligence to the Afghan mujahideen who were fighting the Soviet forces. Pakistan, sharing a long border with Afghanistan and already having a relatively strong military infrastructure, became the natural choice. This wasn't about shared democratic ideals. This was about convenience, access, and proximity. America didn't support Pakistan because it admired its governance or admired its policies. It supported Pakistan because Pakistan was positioned exactly where America needed a partner to be. This pattern continued well into the post-9/11 era. When the United States launched its war on terror and invaded Afghanistan in 2001, once again, Pakistan's geography became its most valuable asset. The U.S. required access to air routes, intelligence cooperation, and military logistics that could only come from a neighboring country with deep entanglements in the region's tribal and militant networks. And though India had the democratic values America often champions, it was not Pakistan's neighbor. It did not share a 2,640-kilometer border with Afghanistan. It could not offer the same ground-level leverage. Hence, Pakistan, despite its wavering commitment and controversial dual role in harboring and hunting extremists, remained in Washington's inner circle, not because it was trustworthy, but because it was necessary. Furthermore, the port of Gwadar, located in Pakistan's Balochistan province, holds strategic significance in global trade and maritime routes. It lies near the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil passes. The port also plays a critical role in China's Belt and Road Initiative. For the U.S., maintaining visibility and influence in this region is not a matter of preference. It is a matter of global economic stability and security. If America were to completely abandon its relationship with Pakistan, it would risk losing vital access to a region that continues to be a flashpoint of global contention and competition, especially with China asserting its presence more aggressively. Now consider how geography has influenced other American alliances. The U.S. has long supported regimes and governments that, by all democratic standards, fall short of its stated ideals. Why? Because geography demands it. From Saudi Arabia in the Middle East to Turkey and NATO, America has often aligned itself with countries situated in pivotal locations, not because of shared values, but because of the access, leverage, and strategic benefits they provide. Pakistan fits firmly into this category. It gives America a foothold in a volatile region, intelligence corridors to monitor insurgent groups, and a means to keep an eye on Iran, China, and India all at once. Even today, with rising tensions between China and the West, Pakistan's geographic position becomes even more critical. China's deepening economic and military ties with Pakistan mean that the U.S. must remain engaged to avoid being completely sidelined in the region. India, on the other hand, while growing in global influence and strategic relevance, does not offer the same kind of geographical leverage. It does not border Afghanistan. It is not involved in the same way in Middle Eastern dynamics. Its rise as a democratic and economic power is welcomed by Washington, but that welcome doesn't erase the tactical value Pakistan continues to offer. The U.S. can praise India, trade with it, and call it a partner, but it cannot afford to neglect the geographical advantage Pakistan provides. So while emotions and values dominate public discourse, behind closed doors, in diplomatic war rooms, and across Pentagon maps, geography continues to reign supreme. In this game of power and proximity, Pakistan's location has repeatedly made it a partner of necessity for the United States, even when values did not align and trust was fragile. When examining the long-standing relationship between the United States and Pakistan, one cannot overlook the central role that Afghanistan has played in shaping that alliance. The Afghanistan factor is not merely a backdrop, it is a driving force that has repeatedly brought America closer to Pakistan, regardless of ideological mismatches or policy disagreements. From the Cold War to the post-9/11 world, Pakistan's relevance has been amplified and sustained largely because of its geographic, ethnic, and political proximity to Afghanistan. It has functioned not only as a staging ground for operations, but also as a critical player in intelligence, diplomacy, and regional negotiations. The American relationship with Pakistan has time and again been deeply tied to its strategies in Afghanistan, sometimes willingly, sometimes reluctantly, but always inevitably. In the 1980s, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, it marked a seismic shift in global geopolitics. The United States, in its fervent opposition to communist expansion, saw this as an opportunity to deliver a major blow to Soviet power. But it couldn't do it alone. The rugged, mountainous terrain of Afghanistan made direct military intervention logistically and politically risky. Instead, the U.S. opted for a proxy strategy, supporting the Afghan Mujahideen in their resistance against the Soviet forces. This support needed a conduit, a reliable partner on the ground, someone who could facilitate the flow of weapons, money, and training. Pakistan, sharing a long and porous border with Afghanistan and already home to a growing number of Afghan refugees and militant networks, became the natural choice. Under General Zia-ul-Haq's military regime, Pakistan welcomed American support and funding, using the opportunity to strengthen its own regional influence. Billions of dollars in aid and weaponry poured into Pakistan, with the CIA working closely with the ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, to train and equip the Mujahideen. It was a partnership born not of shared democratic ideals, but of shared strategic interests. Fast forward to 2001, the world changed overnight when the Twin Towers fell on September 11th. America's war on terror began with a singular focus: dismantling al-Qaeda and removing the Taliban regime that gave them sanctuary in Afghanistan. Once again, Washington turned to Pakistan, not because it was the most trustworthy ally, but because it was indispensable. The U.S. needed air corridors for its military aircraft, intelligence on Taliban movements, and access to supply routes into landlocked Afghanistan. Without Pakistan's cooperation, launching and sustaining a military operation in Afghanistan would have been nearly impossible. And so, despite the complex and often contradictory role Pakistan played in harboring and at times supporting militant elements within its borders, America continued to pour billions in military and economic aid into the country. The relationship was transactional, tense, and frequently tested, but it endured because the alternative, losing access to Afghanistan's front lines, was strategically unacceptable. One of the most glaring examples of this fragile cooperation came in 2011, when U.S. Navy SEALs conducted a covert raid in Abbottabad, Pakistan, killing Osama bin Laden. The fact that the world's most wanted terrorist was found living in a compound just a stone's throw away from Pakistan's premier military academy raised eyebrows around the world. It also confirmed what many in Washington had long suspected, that elements within Pakistan's establishment were playing a dangerous double game And yet, despite this betrayal, the United States did not sever ties. Why? Because the war in Afghanistan was still ongoing. America still needed Pakistani airspace, intelligence networks, and logistical routes. Cutting ties would have jeopardized ongoing operations and left American troops vulnerable. The cost of abandonment outweighed the outrage of betrayal. Moreover, the tribal belts and border regions of Pakistan, especially areas like North Waziristan, became hotbeds of insurgency that spilled directly into Afghanistan. The Haqqani network, Taliban factions, and al-Qaeda remnants found refuge in these loosely governed spaces. For every military offensive the U.S. launched inside Afghanistan, there was a corresponding concern about cross-border safe havens in Pakistan. The U.S. knew it could not win the war in Afghanistan without at least some level of cooperation from Pakistan. That grim reality forced a complicated relationship into motion, a blend of diplomacy, pressure, funding, and occasional threats. Even during peace negotiations with the Taliban years later, Pakistan remained central. When the Trump administration began talks with the Taliban in Doha, it was Pakistan that helped bring the group to the table. Despite its past support for the Taliban, Pakistan was once again seen as the key to unlocking a potential solution. The irony was clear. The country that once helped fuel the insurgency was now helping mediate its political resolution. Yet, America had little choice. The Afghanistan factor dictated that Pakistan had to be involved, not because it had earned that trust, but because geography, history, and influence made it impossible to exclude. Throughout this decades-long entanglement, Pakistan's position next to Afghanistan has given it extraordinary leverage over U.S. policy. It has used this leverage to secure military aid, negotiate diplomatic favor, and insulate itself from deeper scrutiny. For America, every stage of its involvement in Afghanistan, whether war, reconstruction, or withdrawal, has come with a quiet, often uneasy reliance on Pakistan's cooperation. The Afghanistan factor isn't just a chapter in U.S.-Pakistan relations, it is the thread that ties the entire story together. One of the most overlooked yet deeply influential drivers behind America's foreign policy in South Asia is the strategy of containing China through what can be described as dual leverage, maintaining calculated relationships with both India and Pakistan to create strategic pressure on Beijing from multiple fronts. This is not merely about military alliances or economic partnerships. It is a long-term geopolitical chess move where both India and Pakistan serve as pieces positioned on either side of China's borders. While public narratives often portray America as favoring one nation over the other, particularly in times of regional conflict or tension, the reality is that Washington engages both Delhi and Islamabad with different tools and expectations, not out of indecisiveness, but out of necessity. The goal is to ensure that China, with its rising military capabilities, aggressive territorial claims, and expanding economic influence, faces a fragmented neighborhood rather than a unified front that leans fully into Beijing's orbit. From the American perspective, India represents the democratic counterweight to China in Asia, a rising superpower with a booming economy, a vibrant civil society, and a strategic location along China's southern flank. India's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific aligns with U.S. efforts to create a balance of power in a region that China increasingly seeks to dominate. As a result, the U.S. has enhanced its defense and technological cooperation with India over the past 2 decades, signing agreements like COMCASA, Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement, and BECA, Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement, which facilitate the sharing of geospatial and military intelligence. The Quad Alliance, comprising the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia, further reinforces this strategy, emphasizing maritime security and regional stability in the face of China's aggressive posturing in the South China Sea. However, the American playbook doesn't rely solely on India. While New Delhi is a strong partner in curbing China's influence in the Indo-Pacific, Pakistan presents a different kind of leverage, one that is based on its proximity to Western China and its deepening alliance with Beijing through initiatives like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. This $62 billion infrastructure project, a flagship of China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, has transformed Pakistan into a critical node in China's long-term strategic vision. Gwadar Port, located in Pakistan's Balochistan province, offers China direct access to the Arabian Sea, bypassing the vulnerable Strait of Malacca. This access not only reduces China's dependency on traditional maritime routes, but also expands its footprint into the Indian Ocean. From America's perspective, allowing China to operate unchecked in Pakistan would be a dangerous concession, one that could tilt regional influence entirely in Beijing's favor. To counterbalance this, the U.S. has maintained a complex, often uneasy relationship with Pakistan. Despite knowing Islamabad's closeness to Beijing, Washington continues to engage diplomatically, militarily, and economically, recognizing that disengagement would push Pakistan further into China's embrace. U.S. military aid, though reduced in recent years, has historically served to retain some level of influence within Pakistan's powerful military establishment. Intelligence cooperation, even during times of political strain, has continued in various forms. The logic is clear. By remaining present and invested in Pakistan, America ensures that Beijing does not enjoy a monopoly over the country's loyalties. It is not about converting Pakistan into a Western ally. It is about denying China an uncontested partner in South Asia. This dual-track approach allows the U.S. to apply pressure from two sides. On one hand, it strengthens India's regional capabilities, including naval expansions and missile defense, to deter China's moves along their disputed border. On the other hand, it stays diplomatically engaged with Pakistan to limit how far and how deeply China can extend its influence westward. This is especially relevant given China's ambitions under President Xi Jinping, who has expanded Chinese engagement not only through military investments, but also via digital infrastructure, telecommunications, and soft power diplomacy. If the U.S. were to fully abandon Pakistan, it would effectively surrender a crucial front line in this larger ideological and strategic contest. The same logic applies when it comes to Afghanistan. After America's withdrawal, China quickly expressed interest in investing in Afghan minerals and infrastructure. A Pakistan completely aligned with China could facilitate Beijing's entry into Afghanistan, potentially creating a China-Pakistan-Afghanistan axis that would exclude American influence altogether. Maintaining a working relationship with Pakistan, even when trust is low, serves to obstruct such regional realignments. It gives Washington the ability to monitor and influence developments in a region that sits at the crossroads of Central and South Asia. This containment strategy is not overtly confrontational. It doesn't rely solely on military buildup or economic sanctions. Instead, it's built on relationships, sometimes transactional, sometimes diplomatic, often uncomfortable. By positioning itself between India's open partnership and Pakistan's guarded engagement, the United States crafts a two-pronged pressure system designed to check China's expansionism. This strategy doesn't require complete loyalty from either India or Pakistan. It requires presence, patience, and persistent influence. In the intricate world of geopolitics, where alliances shift and interests outweigh ideologies, three pillars define America's enduring engagement with Pakistan: arms, influence, and intelligence. These elements are not abstract concepts. They are tangible levers of power, mechanisms of control, and instruments of diplomacy that have enabled the United States to maintain a foothold in a volatile region despite deep mistrust and conflicting agendas. When examining why America continues to engage with Pakistan, sometimes at the cost of alienating India or appearing hypocritical on the global stage, one must understand how military cooperation, diplomatic influence, and intelligence networks are not just tools of engagement, but necessities in the larger framework of regional and global security. From the early days of the Cold War, Pakistan became a recipient of American military hardware, funding, and training, not because of shared values, but because of strategic necessity. As early as the 1950s, Pakistan was brought into U.S.-led military alliances such as SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and CENTO, Central Treaty Organization. These were not symbolic gestures. They came with billions of dollars in military aid, sophisticated weaponry, and advanced training for Pakistani forces. The idea was simple: build up Pakistan's military capabilities to counterbalance Soviet expansion and contain India's pro-Soviet leanings at the time. This arrangement laid the foundation for decades of military-to-military ties that continue to influence the relationship today. American weapon systems, aircraft, and logistical frameworks became embedded within Pakistan's defense apparatus, creating long-term dependency and mutual utility. During the war in Afghanistan in the 1980s, this arms pipeline intensified. The CIA, working through Pakistan's ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, funneled weapons and money to the Afghan Mujahideen. The Stinger missile program is a prime example. These shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles allowed Afghan fighters to shoot down Soviet helicopters, dramatically shifting the tide of war. Pakistan, as the intermediary, gained access to modern American military technology and, more importantly, to the channels of influence that came with such operations. It wasn't just about the weapons. It was about being the gatekeeper. The United States needed Pakistan to execute its regional strategy, and Pakistan knew the leverage this provided. After 9/11, the U.S.-Pakistan military partnership entered a new phase. America's global war on terror meant boots on the ground in Afghanistan and drone strikes across the border. Once again, Pakistan became a staging ground with its airspace, bases, and roads used for military logistics. In return, Pakistan received billions more in military and economic aid, along with counter-terrorism training and equipment. However, this relationship was fraught with contradictions. On one hand, the U.S. relied on Pakistan to hunt down Taliban and al-Qaeda operatives. On the other hand, it became increasingly clear that some of these elements were being harbored within Pakistani borders, often with the implicit knowledge or direct involvement of the ISI. Yet, despite these concerns, the arms continued to flow. Strategic necessity, not moral clarity, determined the terms of engagement. Beyond military hardware, influence has played a critical role. Washington understands that in Pakistan, the military is not just a defense institution, it is a political, economic, and ideological force. Therefore, maintaining relationships with Pakistani generals and defense officials has become a core strategy for U.S. policymakers. This influence is exerted through joint training programs, high-level defense dialogues, and institutional partnerships. The U.S. has used this access not just to shape Pakistan's defense posture, but to gain leverage in regional negotiations, nuclear non-proliferation talks, and counterterrorism policies. Even when civilian governments in Pakistan have been unstable or anti-American, the military-to-military relationship has provided continuity and a degree of predictability. In a region plagued by volatility, that kind of access is a strategic asset. Intelligence cooperation, perhaps the most opaque yet critical aspect of the relationship, has been both the glue and the point of greatest tension between the two nations. The ISI and the CIA have worked together for decades, often sharing intelligence on high-value targets, terrorist cells, and regional insurgent movements. But this cooperation has never been free of suspicion. The discovery of Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad in 2011, living in close proximity to Pakistan's military academy, stunned the world and severely damaged trust. Yet within months, intelligence collaboration resumed, albeit more cautiously. The reason was clear. Despite betrayal, the United States needed Pakistan's eyes and ears in a region where no other ally had such intimate knowledge of militant networks and tribal dynamics. Intelligence gathering in regions like the federally administered tribal areas, FATA, Baluchistan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, would be nearly impossible for American operatives without at least tacit cooperation from Pakistan's intelligence community. Moreover, Pakistan's strategic location allows it to monitor activities not just in Afghanistan, but also in Iran, China's western frontier, and even Central Asia. In this sense, intelligence cooperation with Pakistan offers a multidimensional advantage. It is not confined to terrorism, but extends into broader geopolitical surveillance. The Americans know that Pakistan's intelligence apparatus is deeply embedded in the region's clandestine networks. While this makes them dangerous and unpredictable partners, it also makes them indispensable. For every drone strike approved, every insurgent cell dismantled, and every negotiation with regional actors, there is likely a trail that runs through Pakistan's intelligence community. This triad of arms, influence, and intelligence forms the bedrock of U.S. engagement with Pakistan. It explains why, despite profound ideological differences and frequent diplomatic breakdowns, the relationship endures. These are not ephemeral connections. They are institutional, systemic, and rooted in decades of mutual dependency, however reluctant. They are a testament to the cold calculus of realpolitik, where the question is never just who is right, but always who is useful. India's independent posture on the global stage is one of the most defining features of its foreign policy and one of the most challenging realities for the United States to navigate. Unlike many of America's traditional allies who align closely with U.S. positions on major international issues, India operates with a mindset deeply rooted in strategic autonomy. This posture is not a recent development, but a product of historical experience, civilizational confidence, and a long-standing desire to avoid becoming entangled in power blocks. Since the Cold War era, when India chose a path of non-alignment rather than siding with either the US or the Soviet Union, this independent approach has guided New Delhi's interactions with global powers. Even today, as U.S.-India relations have grown warmer and more cooperative, especially in the areas of defense, technology, and trade, India has consistently demonstrated its unwillingness to be drawn into any alliance structure that could compromise its sovereignty or force its hand in foreign affairs. One of the most recent and striking examples of this independent posture is India's stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. While much of the Western world, led by the United States, condemned Russia's invasion and imposed sweeping sanctions, India chose a path of strategic silence and careful diplomacy. It abstained from key United Nations votes condemning Russia's actions, continued to engage diplomatically with Moscow, and even increased its imports of discounted Russian oil, arguing that national interest and energy security were paramount. For American policymakers who hoped that the growing partnership with India would translate into tighter alignment on global security issues, this came as a sobering reminder. India was not going to sacrifice its long-standing relationship with Russia, a country that had been a consistent defense partner for decades, just to please the West. In Indian strategic thinking, it is not loyalty that governs foreign relations, but leverage and flexibility. This posture also affects how India views its relationships with neighboring countries and regional crises. Take, for instance, the issue of Afghanistan. After the U.S. withdrawal and the return of the Taliban, India adopted a cautious wait-and-watch approach, refraining from rushing into either recognition or condemnation. Despite having invested billions in Afghan infrastructure and development during the U.S.-led intervention, India refrained from joining any Western bloc calling for direct action or sanctions. Instead, it focused on quietly recalibrating its outreach, protecting its strategic interests without becoming entangled in a collapsed Western project. This behavior, from Washington's perspective, can appear uncooperative. But from New Delhi's viewpoint, it reflects a consistent principle: never bet the house on another nation's strategy. India's independent posture also manifests in its defense procurement policies. While India has signed landmark defense cooperation agreements with the United States and participated in military exercises such as the Malabar naval drills alongside the US, Japan, and Australia, it has also continued purchasing major weapon systems from Russia, including including the S-400 missile defense system. This deal, in particular, tested the U.S.-India relationship as it put India at risk of sanctions under America's Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CAATSA. But India stood firm, signaling that it would not be coerced into abandoning its diversified defense portfolio. Its logic was pragmatic. No single country could fulfill all of India's security needs, and maintaining multiple suppliers allowed India to remain free from overdependence on any one partner. Washington, despite its discomfort, ultimately had to make room for India's position, recognizing the strategic value of the partnership outweighed the cost of confrontation. In regional conflicts as well, India charts its own course. In the Israel-Palestine issue, India has historically balanced support for the Palestinian cause with growing relations with Israel, reflecting its ability to manage complex diplomatic contradictions. In the South China Sea, while India expresses concern over freedom of navigation, it has stopped short of joining any direct military pushback against China, choosing instead to bolster its own maritime capacity. Even with Quad, a grouping often perceived as a coalition to contain China, India is the most cautious player, emphasizing economic and health cooperation over overt military alignment. This careful calibration reflects India's belief that its power lies in being unpredictable and unbound. India's independent posture becomes even more pronounced in multilateral forms. Whether it's the G20, BRICS, or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, India participates robustly, asserting its own vision of global governance, often divergent from Western expectations. In global climate negotiations, too, India has resisted externally imposed targets, arguing that its developmental needs require a different pathway. It pushes back against narratives that ignore historical emissions by Western nations and instead focuses on equity, technology transfers, and financial support for developing countries. This assertiveness doesn't signal antagonism toward the West. It reflects India's insistence on being treated as an equal, not a subordinate in the international order. The essence of India's foreign policy posture is built on a refusal to be boxed in. It embraces cooperation but resists alignment, favors dialogue over dependency, and values options over obligations. This independent streak complicates America's approach in South Asia, especially when seeking unified regional coalitions to counterbalance adversaries like China or contain volatility from nations like Pakistan. India will work with the United States, but only on terms that allow it to preserve its freedom of action. That, in many ways, is both a strength and a barrier in their evolving partnership. In the world of international relations, morality often takes a backseat to interests, and diplomacy becomes less about friendship and more about leverage. This is the essence of realpolitik, the art of navigating global affairs through a pragmatic, strategic, and often unsentimental lens. When nations act, they do so not based on emotional bonds or ideological alignment, but on cold calculations of power, security, and influence. The relationship between the United States and Pakistan, particularly in the context of its strained ties with India, is a textbook case of realpolitik in motion. Despite shared democratic values and long-standing defense cooperation with India, the United States continues to engage Pakistan diplomatically, militarily, and financially, not because of loyalty or preference, but because of necessity. This often perplexes observers who expect consistency in foreign policy. But in reality, diplomacy is rarely about consistency, it is about utility. Pakistan, despite being mired in internal instability, economic fragility, and governance challenges, occupies a position of enduring geopolitical importance. Its location at the crossroads of Central Asia, the Middle East, and South Asia makes it a strategic fulcrum. For the United States, this translates into a country that cannot be ignored, no matter how difficult or unreliable it may seem as a partner. The principle of realpolitik dictates that engagement with Pakistan is not optional. It is essential, whether it's the war in Afghanistan, the threat of nuclear proliferation, the rise of terrorism, or the increasing influence of China through the Belt and Road Initiative. Pakistan sits at the intersection of every major U.S. strategic concern in the region. To walk away would be to surrender leverage in one of the most volatile and consequential parts of the world. This explains why, even after the discovery of Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, the U.S. did not sever ties with Pakistan. The raid was carried out unilaterally, signaling deep distrust. Yet in the months that followed, the two countries resumed dialogue, shared intelligence, and continued military cooperation. Realpolitik demanded it. The same logic applied during the Cold War, when Pakistan was an indispensable ally in helping the U.S. counter Soviet influence in the region. Despite the country's authoritarian governments and internal repression, Washington provided extensive military and economic aid, focusing not on internal governance, but on external strategic alignment. This pattern repeated during the War on Terror, when Pakistan served as both a partner and a problem, hosting militant groups while simultaneously assisting in counterterrorism operations. Such contradictions are not anomalies in diplomacy. They are features of realpolitik. Even today, while the U.S. deepens its partnership with India, viewed as a counterweight to China's rising power, Washington continues to keep lines open with Islamabad. This dual-track diplomacy allows the U.S. to maintain influence on both sides of the India-Pakistan divide. It is a hedge strategy designed to prevent any single power, especially China, from gaining unchallenged influence over Pakistan. Given that Beijing has made deep inroads through infrastructure investment, military cooperation, and political alignment, American disengagement would create a vacuum that China would gladly fill. Maintaining a presence, even a minimal one, allows the U.S. to preserve its stake in Pakistan's decision-making processes, influence its regional posture, and respond quickly to any crisis that could spiral out of control. Realpolitik also shapes how the United States approaches issues of democracy and human rights in Pakistan. While it routinely criticizes authoritarian regimes elsewhere, Washington often softens its tone with Islamabad. Elections marred by controversy, suppression of dissent, or judicial overreach may draw concern, but not condemnation. The reason is not ideological hypocrisy, it is strategic calculus. Alienating Pakistan over its domestic affairs could jeopardize cooperation on broader regional security matters. Diplomacy in this context becomes less about promoting values and more about protecting interests. This frustrates human rights advocates, but aligns with the realities of power politics. Moreover, the U.S. understands that Pakistan's military is not just a defense institution, it is the most powerful political actor in the country. Therefore, diplomatic channels are designed to engage not only the civilian government, but also the military establishment. High-level Pentagon to ISI communications, backdoor diplomacy, and defense delegations serve as tools to manage tensions and preserve stability. This form of engagement might bypass democratic institutions, but in realpolitik, effectiveness often outweighs optics.